Welcome to Unit 1 of the Networker Training course. In this unit we're going to discuss some foundational principles. There's some key scriptures that we want to consider in this first unit. First of all, in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 9 to 12, we see some of the principles behind the power of collaboration. Secondly, in Philippians 2, very familiar passage, those first 13 verses, we see that there's great respect for each other that will come from humility. In Matthew 20, verse 1 to 16, and Luke 10, verse 2, we see God's heart for working together. And then we can see some principles of the need for a whole village to work together when we read 2 Corinthians chapter 8. There are two main themes in this unit. To have strong foundational principles, we need two things. Number one, the network and its members must know why they are committing to the network, what they are working towards, and how their efforts at contributing into that core network are going to produce a bigger, better purpose for children at risk. Secondly, having core beliefs and principles that all of us can agree on will undergird the vision and all the activities, and will give clarity on these things, which is going to be absolutely vital.
And so as we begin our learning journey, we want to reflect on 4 central themes that are at Viva's heart. Okay, 4 of them. First one is, who are the children we serve? It's very important. The second one is, what's God's heart for children? How does it pump? Okay. The third thing we'll be talking about here is the local church, the role of the local church and how it brings hope to the world. And then finally, we'll be looking at working together, which is the DNA of Viva Network.
Okay, so for the first of those 4 principles that Paul has just told us about, the principle about knowing who are the children that we serve. Let's think about that for a moment. In Viva, we use the term children at risk. Some networks might call it vulnerable children. Others would just say children. But all of our children sometimes are at risk in some way. They're all vulnerable. That's a part of what it is to be a child. They're vulnerable. In 2014, the Lausanne Children at Risk Working Group defined children at risk like this. Persons under 18, including the unborn child, who experience an intense or a chronic risk factor, or a combination of risk factors in personal, environmental, and or relational domains that prevent them from pursuing and fulfilling their God-given potential. Whatever the term is that you use, you need to be clear on your own definition of who are the children who your network is serving. The key questions for each of your networks to consider are: which children are we talking about? What are the risks that they're facing? Why are they facing those risks? How at risk are they? And number 5, what causes these risks?
Now, in some ways, every child is at risk. But in our work, we have to highlight and prioritize those situations where children experiencing great unmet needs and where outside engagement is most urgent. Now, good practice in our work with children at risk also celebrates the value of child participation so that children can see themselves as agents of change in their own lives rather than as defenseless objects of charity. Our efforts generally focus on the most serious risks, such as homelessness, child labor or sexual exploitation. Hopefully, we're also working to prevent abuse as well as repairing the damage once it has happened.
Many children face multiple overlapping risks. Foundational to the vast majority of serious risk is that a child will not achieve their God-given potential in the presence of real poverty. Children living in extreme poverty on less than $1.25 a day are far more likely to experience other complex risk factors. However, while economic assistance can be of help to reduce the risk, there's also a desperate need to build resilience in children and strong social networks that can protect children even despite and in the face of financial hardship. Identifying and fostering resilience is often the first and best step in helping any child who is at risk.
Now, as Christians, we also want to think about the spiritual dimensions of risk. A child with a broken spirit, weakened faith, or the lack of access to the gospel will mean that they will not reach their God-given potential. Understanding children at risk is especially important for the global church in the 21st century that has been hard hit by the coronavirus. We want churches to fully appreciate their responsibility to help reach children within their own communities and beyond. We invite churches everywhere to develop effective, innovative, interrogative, systematic and collaborative approaches that will realize the kingdom of heaven more fully for children, families, and communities.
At the conclusion of this first principle about children at risk in this first module, we just want you to reflect on 3 questions. Here they are. Number 1, what language do you use in your network to describe children at risk or the children that you're working with? What's the language that you're using? Secondly, how is the church in your geographical sphere of influence responding to the needs of children in that locality? And thirdly, what can you as a network and you as individuals do to help people to work together to identify these very children who are at risk in your locality?